Hi,
Good afternoon. How are you?
good afternoon. You're Mr. Allen.
That's correct.
All right, I'm Verdaillia Turner, and I'm glad that you have joined us today. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
No problem. Thank you guys for inviting me.
With me today, I have a veteran teacher, and she's on the Atlanta Federation of Teachers School Board. She's sitting right next to me, and this is Mrs. Franklin Long.
Hi, Miss Long. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you.
We also have with us a veteran teacher from Atlanta Public Schools, and she taught many disciplines over the years, and that's Ramonia Toombs.
Hello.
He can't see you. You have to come over here so he can see you. And
Hello.
Ramonia has been listening all day remotely, although we're saying that because this is being recorded, Mr. Allen, and we're going to share this information with the greater community. And we
Awesome.
wanted folks to know we just being fair. And we also have our executive director of the Georgia Federation of Teachers with us, Mr. Ron Fowler.
How you doing there?
Hello. How are you?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to start by asking you, what city are you a native of?
I am a native of Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow, we got a lot of people who
Yeah,
are from Atlanta.
Yes.
And what high school did you attend?
I am a graduate of Frederick Douglass High School.
All right. And what do you do for a living right now?
I am currently teaching special education at Seven Pillars Career Academy.
Okay. And why are you running for Atlanta Board of Education?
I'm running for the Board of Education here in the city of Atlanta as a 17-year educator because I believe it's time for our students in the city of Atlanta to have a world-class educational system. I believe we can get there with some simple steps to help us get in the right direction. And I believe that centering policies around early education, family and community engagement, as well as workforce development are some key areas that need to be improved. And it's also showing up in our student success as well as our schools.
Thank you. Tell us two positives about this current board and two negatives.
Two positives about this current board is that they have shown innovation in regards to leadership as they have brought in the previous superintendent, Dr. Christarfin, and they have also brought in our current superintendent, Dr. Herring. I will also say that the board has, as a positive, has done some work around centering what the Atlanta Public Schools independent system will look like in the future in regards to strategic planning. Two areas of improvement or growth areas as a teacher, I like to say growth areas. One would definitely be strengthening accountability measures. I think that governance can definitely be improved by how we are holding our top employee, which is our superintendent, accountable, and also policy development and review. I did a lot of research projects over the last 2 years with my students, and we realized that there are policies within the system that have not been revised or reviewed since 2000. And a lot of these areas are impacting student achievement. And so those are two areas of growth that I would say the board definitely needs.
And what does it look like to have employee input that's respected and that the public knows what's going on as it relates to policy influence? And when we speak of that, we're not speaking of an ombudsman or hand-picked committee of teachers by the superintendent or the principal. So what do you think that might look like?
Well, one of the areas that I am focusing on in regards to my campaign is improving teacher flexibility and autonomy. And when you hear those two words, a lot of school leaders, policy developers look away or they shy away from the big conversation around the impact that we as teachers have on the outcomes of our students. And so I definitely believe that these committees should be inclusive of a variety of things. I believe that age plays a major role in the performance of teachers. I'm old school. I came from a lot of the tutelage of former principals and longtime educational leaders in Atlanta Public Schools. And I can hear them saying right now that you aren't a seasoned teacher yet until you've been in the classroom for at least 5 years. And thinking back on that, it truly does make an impact because at year 5, I'm able to say, I know the community my students are coming from. I can bridge the gap between pedagogy and new instructional practices that the district is introducing to us. And I can bring a better balance to the classroom by having that experience. And what I have seen in Atlanta, especially the last 8 years, is that we haven't really valued teachers, and especially the expertise that we bring. And the red flags that pop up to me are when this behavior was displayed years before the cheating scandal was finally exposed. And having been an employee in the district at that time, my school was not a part of the scandal. However, working in the district during that time, I realized that we begin to lose our way when we are not valuing the voices of teachers. And so as a teacher, I definitely believe that we should not only be at the table, but we should be an intricate part of helping to drive the conversations around what better educational outcomes look like for our students.
We used to be supportive of formalized process, because if not that, teachers are still going to be at the whims and the he and the haws of whatever the administration wants to do, as opposed to some of our other states that lead in education by the way that we're measuring it now, where teachers have a formalized process and are recognized as such. And many times what people do, they hide behind the fact that, well, it's up to the teacher organizations, or it's up to the law, when we already know that this board can meet and confer, because there's nothing illegal about it with the employees, and they certainly know that we exist.
That's right.
But they use excuses. We often quote Frederick Douglass that nothing concede, power to concede anything without a demand. But if we know that we want to include teachers and we know that they are organized, we wonder what some of the problems are in terms of just doing the right thing and inviting us to the table, like you would invite Coca-Cola and anybody else to the table.
Well, let me start with this. As a former administrator on the school and district level in Atlanta Public Schools, as well as a longtime teacher, I understand how, when the board sets policies, what that work looks like for the leadership team, working on the 8th floor next to the superintendent's office, but also having been a teacher in the district teaching English language arts and also reading. I saw how the policy development definitely impacted what we were able to do in the classroom. And so it's the intentionality. And it also connects back to the big piece around accountability in regards to what the board knows can be done. And one of the things that my students and I have recently been working on has been making sure that students also have a seat at the table in regards to what teaching and instruction looks like. What do our policies look like in regards to even COVID-19, for example, and the impact that this is having in regards to the increasing numbers within our schools. So I definitely want to make sure that I'm driving the fact that inclusion, diversity includes those employees that are most intricate to the impact that we're having on students in regards to their social, emotional, and academic development. And that begins with teachers. That begins with instructional leaders, educational leaders. And something that we also don't talk a lot about is connecting with our retired educators who have the expertise and the wisdom that can also bring something different to the table as well. Those voices should also be included in the work that we're doing in regards to reimagining education.
Okay. We have several people on this current board and on the one that preceded it that were from Teach for America. Some of them are over at City Hall right now. Some of them are running for positions for City Hall. Give us just do a little discussion on Teach for America. What's good and bad about it? And what's your understanding about Teach for America?
I think Teach for America is good with creating a community of educators and building that sense of community. I also think that Teach for America is good at creating a pipeline of educators that, connect with them throughout the nation and are strategically placed in schools. Having worked with Teach for America over the years, I would definitely say that one area of growth would be the preparation for teachers with discipline and behavior. Having been a lead teacher at the time when TFA had a lot of teachers coming in who were first year, they had no clue about the impact of having sound practices for good classroom management in regards to behavior and discipline. And so that was definitely a growth area for preparing the teachers for that. And also another area of growth was family and community engagement, ensuring that the teachers who were coming into the schools actually knew and understood that Title I isn't simply lower income, or it's not just connected to a particular race. It is a myriad of things, and making sure that you understand the communities, the cultures, the families that you're going to be working with, because that's how you really effectively are able to reach the students. And so those are two areas of growth I would definitely speak to in regards to Teach for America.
We talked about world-class education. No one has thrown that out, that term out to it. And Atlanta has, we know the track and record of preparing or trying to prepare students for college. What are some of the other models that you would like to see in the school system for preparing our students and families for the future?
Well, let me start with this. Investing more in CTAE, I think, is one area that definitely needs to be honed in on. And when talking to my students and I'm asking them, okay, what can we do to better improve your experience and your preparedness for high school? My middle school students are like, we're not even prepared for high school. So if they're not prepared for high school, you can imagine how successful we are in preparing them for careers and for colleges or institutions. And so I would definitely say that putting our dollars with what we're saying is very important. And that's intentional budgeting around courses that can be expanded, flexibility with the calendar. As a special education teacher, I have several students that are on medication. Some of them are, physically not able to get up until 12 noon. And so how are we being flexible in our innovation around offering, night school programs? We know that APS has 2 alternative programs, but do those alternative programs and or the 2 alternative schools, do they offer a night school component that isn't punitive towards students, or it isn't targeting them in regards to behavior, discipline, and attendance? So I think that the creativity that we can have in what this structure looks like, again, connects to the board's role with strategic planning and making sure that we have the leader in place who can envision what education will look like in Atlanta over the next 20 to 30 years. I also would definitely make sure that we improve the exposure and the experiences of our students in regards to workforce development. My father is a small business owner, and of course, he put his 3 children. Uh-oh, did I lose you guys? Hello? It's still recording, but I don't see anyone.
I am so sorry about that. Our internet went out.
No. It's okay, because actually the sun just started shining over here with storming, so it's okay. Uh-oh, are we stuck? Okay. I can hear you all now, but it's still frozen. Uh-oh.
Should be here. Okay, hello,
I can hear you all now.
you can hear me? I am so sorry. If you don't mind, could we start over because we are recording this and it's
Okay.
unfair to have you broken up. We broke up with a few, but not that far. And we're talking right now. Would you give us your name again and what you do for a living?
Okay. My name is Jason B. Allen. I am a special education teacher currently at Seven Pillars Career Academy.
Okay, and you are from which city?
Atlanta, Georgia. Graduate of Frederick Douglass High School.
And why are you running for Atlanta Board of Education?
As a 17-year educator, I'm running for the Atlanta Board of Education because I believe it's time for our children to have a world-class education system. And simple steps that can help us to get in that direction begin with improving policies that will improve the way we engage families and communities, early learning, as well as workforce development.
And for the audience to know, we've already introduced everybody. We're so sorry, everyone. We keep buffering here for some reason. So we're on our telephones right now. We talked about Teach for America, and we wanted you to give us the pros and cons.
Okay, the pros and cons of Teach for America, I definitely would say one pro is that they are very good at creating culture and community. The community of educators that they create and bring together, I think, is something that is a really good practice. Something else that Teach for America does is they're really good with ensuring that they're bringing in new talent that represents a variety of areas within the educational space. Two areas of growth and improvement I would definitely say would be around teacher preparation in regards to classroom management, discipline, and behavior. And also another area will be family and community engagement and making sure that teachers are well aware of the students and families that they will be serving.
Okay, the Board of Education, could you give us two positives and two negatives about this particular board?
Okay, two positives around the current Board of Education. One would be that they brought in two superintendents. One being Dr. Kerstarfin, who is the former superintendent, and the current superintendent, Dr. Lisa Herring, who is leading us right now. And I would also say that they have done a great job in regards to centering the district with strategic plans of what our educational model will look like moving into the future. Two areas of improvement would definitely be the way that we are engaging our families through communication in regards to not just the increasing numbers of COVID-19, but also on the resources and exposures needed for our students to excel in their many disciplines. And also another area of improvement would be policies that are connecting to the way that we do discipline, behavior, and attendance, especially with several different learning models that are taking place.
Thank you. And what are the employees' roles in helping to shape policy? And how important is that? And what does that look like?
I think that the employees play a very intricate role. Some people do surveys to gain feedback. There are some organizations that have listening sessions, but there's also an intentional focus of having, committees that are connected to the board that include students and teachers. That's one of the things that my students are working on right now with, petitioning the Board of Education to have a student and teacher voice on committees that are influencing teaching and learning, specifically policies that are punitive to both, which are connecting to behavior, discipline, and attendance. I think that employees are critical to how policies are shaped, and it's not just the district level or top administrators that should be influencing policy, but those employees who are directly impacted by the policies.
Thank you. In reality, and we've been talking about this a long time, employees have very little input in the city of Atlanta. And it's not that people who have come here like Dr. Kerstarfin didn't know any better, because she worked in Minnesota, she worked in Texas, she worked in DC, where there was a formalized process. We look at states like Massachusetts, where there's a formalized process. And as we measure schools, we know that Massachusetts leads us on out. And we look at world-class educational systems in various countries as measured by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And we have not heard one candidate yet. So we're going to go back to this question that have a clue as to what world-class organization is. I mean, we're just going to say it. You know, it sounds good, but and all of us said, and I was saying it at first, but the components there would require us to do what we know works instead of having employee organizations say, all right, since we got about 8 or 9 of y'all, because some of them are put in and supported by some of the various people who are paying for campaigns for some board members. And what they do, they have these astroturf organizations and groups that come up and they keep Atlanta splintered, and we stay behind. And I'm really going to talk to the Black community about that later on. I mean, we're just going to take the cover off. But thank you for that answer.
Okay.
What are your plans to really include parents? We know that we've talked about internet access and we've talked about Go Teams, and we know from teachers and all that Go Teams are not democratic, really. If the district really know how they are functioning, if their accountability, it sounds good, but it's not as effective as it should be. Just like PTAs sound good and they're not as effective or organized as they should be. That's the hard work. But all right, well, I don't know if I should complete that question. Let me go ahead. I'm sorry, but we want to know actually.
Yes, no, I actually am excited about this question. So
we have about 51,000 students, and they're coming from 40 or 50 some thousand homes.
That's right.
And it is no excuse. We heard Dr. Kastarfin, which was associated with Michelle Reed. It's the first time I'm saying this, although she distanced herself. And we heard her on one interview say, I think there's about 6,000 parents that she know that did not have fastnet internet access and that kind of thing. And she was going to personally make sure they did. Well, is there a way that we can assess every home that our customers, our kids are coming from, to see what kind of situation that they are actually living in other than a little check form, to see whether or not they have computers, and if there are more than 2 or 3 children, and if all of them can be on the internet at one time, if you have to do virtual learning, and if all of them have not the tablets that don't operate, but tablets that do operate, and communicating with parents, even if it means knocking on doors, doing mailings, doing robocalls, showing Atlanta what churches and organizations are helping us to account for every parent, where there's a child walking and breathing in that school, so that the parents are not just coming to coffee meetings where only about 10 or 15 folk might show up and the board member is able to say they did something, but that the parent is totally engaged and educated, let's say on a 4th grade level, about that budget, educated how they can be effective at the school level, educated how they can help teachers discipline, and I'm going to use the word bad children, that you can't teach anything that's not discipline. And I didn't say this to everybody, but this will be going out to the world. What can we do to get parents engaged, other than parents who got the means to be engaged, the savvy to be engaged, or understand the political process, those who are working hard for a living or sick and for whatever reasons are not engaged?
All right, I love this question. So I was a family and community engagement specialist on the district level for Atlanta Public Schools for about 6 years. And we worked extremely hard with building a policy, a plan that really would reflect how Atlanta could improve the way in which we're engaging our families, and not just in the day-to-day operations, but how we are continuing education at home. How are we providing wraparound services that are needed for each family? So much so that the district sent me to Harvard Education College to learn under Dr. Karen Mapp how Atlanta Public Schools could create a family and community engagement department. And so this question is very important because I know that Atlanta has the blueprint of how we can effectively and efficiently engage our families, but it's still failing to do so, which is an intentional practice. One of the very first things that has to be done is we need more meat in the family engagement policy for Atlanta Public Schools. It doesn't really speak to the investment of this board in how we are engaging families. I say this because most teachers understand the work of Title I and the federal dollars. And when we look at the budget, the most money being spent on family and community engagement for Atlanta Public Schools is coming from federal dollars. It's not coming out of the general funds. So when we think about the 48% to 52.8% of our tax dollars that is going to the Atlanta Public School system, what is our investment really in how we're engaging families and communities? We also understand that Title I has a lot of red tape that comes with it. And so the things that need to be done in regards to wraparound services for families that need more assistance and training with workforce development, they need the access to internet bandwidth that would allow our children to be able to continue learning at home. Even ways to better improve parenting skills and really navigating through the 21st learning era. There are a lot of things that can be done around that, but the investment begins with how we are investing in family and community engagement. And so that is the very first thing that I think needs to be done. Having been a parent liaison and understanding that parent liaisons are a part of the 30% of the working poor in Atlanta Public Schools. We were getting paid less than $20,000. And as a district administrator, I was advocating for our parent liaisons to be able to have health insurance. These are parents, these are grandparents that are bridging the gap between home, communities, and schools in some of our schools that really urgently need that support. And the district has no investment within the one position that they have allotted to doing that work. And so as a former parent liaison, as a former district administrator, I have continued to lift my voice to make sure that those essential roles, such as the parent liaison or the parent coordinators in our schools, are actually making an equitable wage so that the work can be improved and they're not overworked in the task of connecting our families to the resources of our schools.
Do you think more organization of coalitions could help with that? I mean, on a continuous basis, especially if we don't jump from one program to another as we do with new superintendents or new election time, because your voters have a tendency to forget, and the problems are still there.
That's correct.
But perhaps, and we want to get beyond the concerned Black clergy. We want to get beyond the NAACP under Mr. Rhodes. We want to get beyond, and she's a friend of mine, the Urban League under Nancy. And the public can ask me why. We don't have anything against them. They do a lot of great things, but we do have some things against them as they meddled in education or try to influence education without including folk who know that business. And Frankie and I know that business, and many other teachers do too. Short of us getting pure D in the streets with an Al Sharpton and everything else. I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm tired of Atlanta being behind because people are gatekeepers. And
I completely understand. No, I completely understand. And I definitely think that we have to be more intentional about how we're creating partnerships. One of the things that Atlanta can definitely grow with, which would be an accountability measure, is how our partnership department is actually providing every department with the resources that it needs. Having worked in tandem with the partnership department as a former district administrator, I know that their department focuses on the heavy hitters. A lot of the organizations that you mentioned who are larger organizations, they also focus a lot on, major businesses and corporations that can bring in.
Funded by those corporations.
Yes, ma'am. No,
right.
Exactly. And too often we forget the mom and pop small businesses that are taking in our youth and really training them. They're making partnerships with teachers to understand, okay, how can we reach this student to really be able to help them understand how to be a productive citizen that wants to be an entrepreneur or, wants to start in the workforce early. We don't have the partnerships with them. My family's foundation supports grandparents raising school-aged children. There are no organizations at the table that are advocating for grandparents. There are really not a lot of, if any, organizations that are, advocating for our exceptional learners who are varied in many disciplines. And so I think that there's definitely some growth that can happen there. But again, it goes back to the former question around family engagement. And we have to have a better policy in place that spells out who the stakeholders are. And I love what you said earlier about the blanket statements, sometimes things are so wide that it really doesn't speak directly to who is included and what needs to be done. And so I want to be able to come in and improve those things.
Okay. Often we have a problem with church and state, and I'm a political science major, and I know that the state should not interfere with the church, but there's nothing that would preclude or exclude the church from interfering with state. We see as classroom teachers and practitioners a breakdown as it relates to respect and authority. And we see so many people with turf, so many different organizations, and what used to be common sense, we thought it was, which was a belt. And that doesn't mean that you're abusing children either. I wasn't abused, and my parents knew that I was a child and I was not their friend. They were not my friend and partner. They were people who loved me. And because everything starts in those homes. So what can we do with churches, pastors, to preach to parents that we got to have discipline in those schools? We got to have respect in those schools. People have to have respect for authority and leadership, and bring back words like honesty and integrity and thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. I'm not trying to advocate for any particular religion, but it's just it was a Mosaic code. We know right from wrong, because we're losing so many of our students because they don't have to study. They'll curse you out, and the parents will too. I'm just being honest. Not all of them, man. Not all of them. I'm just saying we have far too many bad apples. One bad apple can ruin the barrel. I know teachers will probably love this. But what can we actually do together to make sure that Johnny is doing his homework and Johnny is putting his pants up? Yes, I said it because other folk won't. What can we do to get the respect in Atlanta public schools now for authority, period?
I like this. So again, I think it allows me to speak a little bit more to family and community engagement and the urgency around why that is one of the top priorities of mine as a candidate in this school board race. Churches play an intricate role. I'm the trustee chair at my church in East Atlanta that's 121 years old. And we have had some challenges in how we are connecting with the next generation. And a lot of my teaching style is I take, a lot of best practices from old school and then I merge it with new school, because you have to be able to connect the dots, because I have students that are living with their grandparents. I have students who are living with foster parents who may be older than, their traditional parents who they may have lived with at one point in time. I also have people who are raising children who are leading independent living assisted homes and communities. And so there are a myriad of people that are reaching and engaging with this generation. Specifically with our churches, I look at the data from family and community engagement that informs us that, over 80% of Generation Z, which are my students, they are not connected to churches or faith-based institutions. And so I think about how Vacation Bible School has changed and how Sunday school has changed, and the carnivals and the different things that churches would do to connect with communities and have that relationship with schools. And those things aren't happening effectively because there is no investment. Now, one of the recommendations that I have made to Atlanta Public Schools as a former administrator is that we have to build better partnerships with the leaders in our communities that include our faith-based institutions and also our nonprofits. A lot of our nonprofits are doing mission work that helps our parents with, understanding your child learns differently. And so you have to discipline in a different way. Having the hard conversations with parents that, yes, your child may not have any friends at school, and it's okay to, make that connection as a friend for them, but understanding the line of respect that, yes, you are their friend, but you are also an adult. And having had parents as a teacher who have done that, I've had to sit down with, parents and tell them, listen, this is why it's hard for them to engage with adults in buildings that are schools and community centers, because you have made the lines blurry in regards to how adults and children engage. And so we also have to be intentional about how we have the conversations about that. And churches play a major role in that. I tell my students this a lot. You know, I reference the Beatitudes, and I'm like, didn't you learn this in Vacation Bible School? And they're like, Mr. Allen, what are you talking about, Vacation Bible School? And so
What's that,
being
right?
able to, yes, being able to also connect though with the one of the things that I have done, and I'm going to wrap this up because I'm always giving best practices as teacher focused, right? One of the things that I have done and I have encouraged other educational leaders to do is to find retired educators who are connected to churches. They could come in and help with reading and literacy programs. They could come in and support the parent liaison who needs assistance. And that's a good way to partner with local churches for, excuse me, food banks, clothing, and other things that families need, especially with parental support and guidance. And so that's how I feel that churches can be better used by our schools if there was an intentional focus with our policies that allow that.
And the will to do so. You're absolutely correct. There are 3 people running in District 9, so more than likely there will be a runoff. Should you win or not win, we certainly want you to stay engaged as a community partner and stay in touch with us. We are willing to help any and all candidates because so many times people disappear. Help organize the mom and pop churches, the startups, the mega churches. Sometimes mega churches can get too mega, but I know they have big responsibilities too. But we certainly got to have a respectful discussion
Yes.
as to a blueprint for action, not just talk. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time on stuff we already know and move out and just have a campaign, a continuous campaign, so that the community will understand that there's going to be no nonsense. It's return to that. Now, COVID-19 has crystallized some of the problems that we knew already existed in education. And we've heard people take a vow, some candidates, that they're engaging more community and family. Well, they got a whole lot of money from federal government to do that too. And COVID, if COVID-19 had not been there, we questioned as to whether or not they would have done it because we looked at their track records and how they catered to particular groups. With that said, there is a movement. People in Buckhead are, using their various arguments so that Buckhead will secede from Atlanta. Some of the people are, and we're not so sure that some former Atlanta school board people who are connected with that have a campaign, and not so sure that a few people on the board are not connected to that also. Not so sure because we've seen Board of Education people climb after being elected to the board. That's a loaded statement I'm making. But what is your opinion about Buckhead seceding from Atlanta, and how would it affect the school district?
Well, I think that it would have a major impact on the school district, considering how our current funding formula is set up. And so a responsibility of the Board of Education is to be an activist, not just an activist, but also an advocate for what a lot of people are talking about, which is equity, but local and state national policies that will impact how we operate schools, how we fund schools, and how we're also able to train and prepare our teachers. And so that's a component that, I'm glad you asked the question, because a lot of times this does not even come up. And when I have been at the state level, especially the state education committee, advocating for the improvement and development of having more educators of color, specifically more Black male educators in areas such as literacy and special education, where Atlanta has huge deficits. I have not seen Atlanta Board of Education members there to advocate for that need. When you look at national call to actions from teachers saying that we need to be better protected in COVID-19 and we need better policies that are addressing things. I have been on a national level advocating for schools in Atlanta to have mandated IHPs. IHPs are individualized health plans. I had a student that passed away at the onset of the pandemic here in Atlanta. And we learned from that what needs to be done in order to make sure that teachers and parents and educators who are impacting the lives of students are prepared with understanding the critical needs of students with severe health conditions. And so when I look at the advocacy around the work of board members, they are unaware of these things, and it simply is not happening. And so when I connect to what we see in regards to equity and the coalition to or correlation to Buckhead, there is a lack of advocacy around the economic equity that has been displaced on really 64 of our public schools in Atlanta. And so how do we begin to ensure that the dollars are actually not going to be further taken away from those schools? When we look at splash dollars, and if we go back in particular looking at the Carver and the Douglas cluster, I want to include Washington in that as well. They had hundreds of students that were allowed into the, I'm going to say it's the Midtown cluster now, the former Grady cluster, as well as the North Atlanta clusters. And they had hundreds of students that should have been in schools in the Douglas cluster, the Carver and Washington clusters. And as soon as their schools were renovated and new sidewalks were put in place and new buses were, ordered and everything was in place, the students who had homeschool zoned for the Douglas, Washington, and Carver clusters were put out of the North Atlanta and Grady clusters, and so, or Midtown clusters. And so I think that it's important in that conversation around Buckhead taking schools that have, absorbed a lot of the federal dollars, a lot of the resources that should have been going to other schools. I think it's the conversation around how do we ensure that those schools are reimbursed, is the word that I will use, for those resources that have been taken and misplaced.
How are we going to make up for the tax dollars that three governments signed off on, millions of dollars that each government should have been receiving? Of course, they had to have Fulton County, Atlanta, and the school board's cooperation. Dr. Kostarpin was there long enough to help. Jason Estevez was the chairperson that led these agendas. So that's part of the role of the chairperson as it relates to developments in the Gulch. Although some of this was taken to court, we love our judges, but we know how judges are seated too. That's all political. So now let's talk about that money, and because the board did not have to participate in giving away those millions of dollars for all of those years that's for development. What is your opinion about that? Because developers are not going to like it, those people who front big bills for campaigns. So should the public have known about it? How do we make up all of that money?
Well, I don't think that the public is being effectively engaged. And that's another area of what board members are commissioned to do. And it's definitely, I was only asked for 2 growth areas, but of course, communication and transparency with our constituents, all of them, in regards to how we are budgeting and the intentionality behind that. And there are a lot of concerns in regards to contracts that Atlanta Public Schools is in and how we are managing those millions of dollars at $903 million in regards to all of the schools. And so the conversation around equity is definitely heavy in Atlanta. And we have for too long put big business first. And there's more of an investment in what they are desiring and needing in regards to what our children and our schools need. And so I definitely think that accountability, when I looked at the amount of audits that are taking place, hence the individualized health plan audit that my students and I have been petitioning APS board members to enact the last year in order to protect teachers and students and decrease the numbers of cases happening in our schools. It simply is not there. And so how are we holding this board accountable in regards to their communication about these deals, about budgeting where our dollars are actually going to? Instead of blanketed statements around, well, it's going to improve equity, it's going to improve innovation. Well, what does that look like when we still have numbers of children who are below grade level in reading, and they are also behind in basic skills in regards to mathematics and other critical areas of learning?
Well, we're going to have to raise an army, and we are willing to help you and some other board members, people who are running with so many great ideas. What is it? Don't forget the council. Did the Atlanta Labor Council reach out to you to interview you yet? And Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council?
They have not. And I am waiting to hear from them because workforce development is definitely one of the major areas that I mentioned earlier with family and community engagement, as well as early learning, that I am connecting with. And we definitely, as a school system, need to improve not just the equitable wages, but also the monies that we put out in regards to contracts where we are partnering with nonprofits and small business owners. Are we really being intentional about making sure that we are being well diverse in that selection of contracts? And of course, that area needs to be improved. And it's not something heavily talked about within the budget of Atlanta Public Schools. And so I would definitely love to be connected with them to be more aware of what their issues are and their concerns, but also to ask their thoughts about some of the things that I know are not being even elevated in conversations within the school board election.
There's so much malpractice in education. But do you have their phone number? I can give it to you.
I will write it down. Yes, ma'am. I am ready.
404
Okay.
525 3559.
3559.
Yes, Sandra
Okay.
Williams is the person to ask for.
Okay.
And a lady named Rita Scott, Rita is not employed by Atlanta Labor Council or anything, but she does sit on the screening committee, and that's not her direct number, but please leave a message for her too. We just do that for both of them.
Okay.
And, we'll say to you to bear in mind that all labor unions aren't the same. Some are private sector, some are public sector. One of our public sector unions in the past, and I'm just going to name them, ASME, has made sure that we have got a lot of candidates who gave away a lot of schools and got a lot of money to get in office to private companies, and they still climb, and I don't have any problem saying it. So I was going to ask you about the different customers, or we would say community partners, like, you know, what the board has emphasized, but you've already answered that. Or as this board, we think, has paid too much attention. I'm just going to say it now since you've already named it, to private companies. So what?
He needs to call them because
Yeah.
tomorrow's the day.
Go ahead on and call them, because we understand that Atlanta Labor Council may be making some recommendations to
Okay.
their CIO on Wednesday. We
Okay.
have asked them, you know, we sent something out today asking them not to do that. If they want to look at city council races, that's okay, or the mayor's race, but the whole law on education. Ask Me is over there. That's a public service, I think, union. And the men and women who belong to Ask Me do some noble, hard work every day. But I'm just going to say it out loud. We got a problem, and the world need to know it with Ask Me leadership. And we've gone up the ladder trying to get this straight. And Ask Me undercut us years ago and brought on the Board of Education that love teaching so much. Some of them got out of it in 2 or 3 years, and they continue to climb. All right. We want to thank you, sir. Is there anything
Thank you all.
you want to lead us, any statement that you want to make in summary to everybody?
I just would add to the conversation that I know that in District 4, I believe there is one other teacher who is actually in the race this season and who is running. However, in 17 years, I believe that I bring a different expertise. You know, one of the things my students say in regards to our conversation around my candidacy for the Atlanta Board of Education is that Mr. Allen started from the bottom and now he's here. And so I understand what it means to be a contractor in the district, having worked in various levels in different areas of the city. Now being able to connect to communities, knowing what, you know, our current teachers, from having retired educators in my own family, are definitely recommending and saying, this is what will work to really improve our students. And again, especially in schools that have not been properly resourced and do not have the adequate support needed. And so I would definitely end us with that to say, I appreciate this opportunity to speak with this Council of Leaders on this evening, and I appreciate your time.
We really do appreciate you too. We really do. So thank you so much, young man, and best of luck to you.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay. Bye-bye.